Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm going to go over Ivara's Artemis bow. Normally I would do a full overview of all of a Warframe's builds. However, because exalted weapons were recently changed, and Ivara has so many possible builds, I'm going to keep it simple and just talk about her exalted weapon. I might do a full comprehensive guide later on, but that's going to be a much longer video. I'm going to start by going over the ability, and then I'm going to talk about my modding setups and show gameplay for each build right after I go over its mods. So for today, Artemis bow. Artemis bow is Ivara's 4. It's her exalted weapon, and it comes in the form of this bow. So the way it works is when you hit 4, she pulls out her bow, and with the bow out, you can either tap the fire button to shoot projectiles in a vertical line, or you can hold the fire button to shoot your projectiles in a horizontal line. Both of these deal the exact same amount of damage, and the only change is the firing position. But if you have it turned sideways, you're going for the kill.
Okay. God! No, he turned it sideways. Kill shot! Kitchen! It's a kill shot! Kitchen!
Unlike other exalted weapons, Artemis bow is not channeled, meaning that there is not a constant energy drain while using the bow. However, the bow does drain energy each time you shoot it, and this cost is affected by ability efficiency. So as you watch my energy while I'm shooting, it's slowly decreasing with each shot. Now for Grineer enemies like these bombards, it's much better to just tap the fire button and shoot in a vertical line. This is because you're going to hit more arrows on one target with enemies like Grineer and Corpus by tapping your fire button, and for enemies like Infested, you might want to charge your fire to shoot horizontally. But as you can see with these paused bombards, Artemis bow makes quick work of them, even without a max damage build. These are some of the most tanky enemies in the game, and Ivara can take care of them with ease. Also, as you can see, enemies shot with Artemis bow get pinned to objects behind them. This can be pretty satisfying. You can also use your alt fire while using Artemis bow to fire whatever quiver arrow you have equipped. So as you can see in the bottom right hand of the screen, I have the cloak arrow selected, meaning that when I hit my alt fire, I cast it at the ground. This can be useful if you want to shoot one on the fly while using your Artemis bow. But that's basically what you need to know for Ivara's exalted weapon. Overall, it's a pretty simple weapon with some extreme destructive power. Now let's look at my modding setups and where I use them. I have 3 different Ivara builds that I use. The normal version is a combination between strength and efficiency with some survivability. I'm using Streamline and Fleeting Expertise paired with Prime Flow to ensure I don't run out of energy, and then Augur Secrets, Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, and Power Drift for strength. While with this build I don't reach the maximum 175% efficiency, I'm still able to maintain my 3 while firing my exalted weapon. For my survivability, I'm using Vitality paired with Quick Thinking to help Ivara survive in tough scenarios. I chose Quick Thinking here because Ivara, especially with Prime Flow, has a high energy pool. Right now mine is at 700. If you don't have Quick Thinking, it's certainly not necessary, but it adds nice survivability to your frame. And for my aura, I'm using Corrosive Projection, simply because reducing enemy armor is extremely good. Instead of this, you could also use something like Growing Power or Energy Siphon, because while using Ivara's Artemis bow, you can still recover energy over time from things like Energy Siphon or Xeneric Energy Dash. This is because it's not a channeled ability. And for my arcanes, I'm using Arcane Guardian and Arcane Energize. Energize definitely isn't necessary. I've sustained my energy very well on Ivara just using the Xeneric Focus School. But if you do have access to the Energize, it is nice. And Guardian just gives you a little more survivability. This build works very well in multiple mission types, but for this example, I'm going to be doing the Assassination Sortie that was up the day I was making this video. The target is the Sergeant, which isn't the most difficult boss, but he still has a lot of health. And as you can see, as soon as I hit him with 2 blasts of my arrows, he was dead. Now, my concentrated arrow build is a little different. For this build, I'm not going for power strength. And that's because I use this more often in lower level content where everything dies in one hit regardless. Meaning I don't need high power strength, especially since concentrated arrow is an incredible boost to damage when you get a headshot. And if you're using this augment, you should always be going for the headshots, and I'll show you why in a second. But again, I'm using both Streamline and Fleet Expertise paired with Prime Flow to help with energy efficiency. On the concentrated arrow version, I'm using maximum efficiency, meaning that I can sustain my abilities easily. And because I'm using concentrated arrow, I'm also going for some ability range here. Ability range increases the explosive radius of concentrated arrow, making it very good at taking out groups of enemies. And because I don't care about duration on this build, I'm using Transient Fortitude. You could also substitute in Blind Rage if you don't mind losing some efficiency. And lastly, I'm using Vitality for survivability. And once again, I have Corrosive Projection on. The arcanes I'm using for this build are a little different. I'm using Arcane Rage and Arcane Acceleration. Arcane Rage is nice for this because you're always going for headshots, meaning that you should have high uptime on this Arcane, giving you 120% damage to your Artemis bow. While Arcane Rage is good, I would say Arcane Acceleration is even better for Concentrated Arrow. And that's because it gives you fire rate. While charging for the normal Artemis bow doesn't increase projectile speed, charging for Concentrated Arrow does. Meaning you want to always be charging your bow for easier headshots, making Arcane Acceleration quite good for this build. I also recorded this footage during the sortie today. As you can see, Concentrated Arrow does a whole lot of damage when you hit headshots. But if you don't hit those headshots, it's real painful. So if you're not confident about hitting headshots, you might want to go for just a regular Ivara build. Personally, Concentrated Arrow is my favorite, mostly because it's really satisfying when you hit a headshot and there's a firework of particles that comes out and everything dies. And finally, my last Ivara build is an Eidolon build. If you've done some public Eidolons, you may have seen an Ivara in your group. This build is essentially full power strength. So as you can see on the left, I have 323% power strength. I have used every power strength mod available. And again, I'm using Streamline, Fleeting Expertise, and Prime Flow for energy efficiency, with Vitality for a little bit of survivability. I'm also using Arcane Nullifiers here to avoid the Eidolon's mag procs. If you're doing Eidolons, you definitely want to have Arcane Nullifiers. The reason that I have 2 equipped here is to give me 100% immunity to the magnetic damage Eidolons cause, meaning that I will never lose energy to the Eidolon. If you have Arcane Nullifiers, they don't need to both be rank 3. You can run one rank 3 and one rank 0 to give you 100% total, because 80 plus 20 is 100. Or you can run a rank 2 and a rank 1 for the same 100% chance. All you need is for the total to be 100%. So with Ivara's Artemis bow, you can take down the Eidolons pretty easy. Please know that Ivara is still not as good as other warframes with snipers like Volt, Chroma, or Rhino. But maybe if Ivara is the only warframe you have built, then you can use her to take down Eidolons on the plains until you get one of the better ones. But for me at least, it's a lot of fun to take out Ivara every once in a while and down some Eidolons with her bow. My Artemis bow builds are pretty simple. Here is my radiation build for doing Eidolons. I'm using Serration and Heavy Caliber for increased damage, with Split Chamber for multi-shot, and Vital Sense and Point Strike for crit. Overall, it's pretty simple. You just want damage plus crit plus multi. And then you can choose whatever elemental mods you want. Here, I'm going for radiation for the Eidolons. And you might be curious why I'm using Heavy Caliber since it reduces my accuracy. For Artemis bow, this effect does not matter. You're still going to hit all your projectiles the same way you would normally. This just gives you a flat increase in damage, which is very good. The other build I'm using for this is very similar. However, I use this for my Concentrated Arrow build, and that's because I run Vile Acceleration over Vigilante Armaments. The reason for this is because I'm charging my bow every shot for Concentrated Arrow, making the 90% fire rate extremely useful. And losing 15% damage is almost nothing, considering I have both Serration and Heavy Caliber. Having Vile Acceleration equipped is basically like having 150% increased damage on my Serration instead of 165, because the damage values on both these mods are additive. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope that this was helpful in both understanding how to mod Ivara and her Artemis bow. And don't be afraid to play around with the builds I showed here, as they're not the end-all be-all builds. If you did find this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe for future content.